Last year, there was some amusement in Washington when it was revealed that the Agriculture Department was requiring magicians that keep bunnies to pull out of hats had to prepare and file with Washington contingency plans for evacuating bunnies in the face of civil disturbances, tornadoes, hurricanes, and floods.
One thing that can be said about the growth of the administrative state beginning in the 1970s is that it happened as much, if not more, under Republican as under Democratic administrations. Nixon was president when the EPA was created, not by statute, but by executive order. And strangely enough, he wasn't impeached for that.
Well, let me say, and this may be something of a public confession on this website of yours, but I was part of the creation of the EPA, so I was there.
This is your opportunity for confession and expiation.
I'm not opposed to regulation of pollution and things such as that. And there were serious environmental problems in the 1970s, and one can argue that they were on the way to being solved anyway. And there's some good arguments there. But the American public was awakening. It was achieved in the 1950s. A belching smokestack had been a welcome symbol of progress and recovery and the growth of the economy. In 1970, not so much. There had been controversies over an oil spill off of Santa Barbara. The Cuyahoga River in Cleveland had caught fire, and something was going to be done. What is interesting is this. I think the creation of the EPA was not all that problematic because there was a statute that said that the president could reorganize agencies at a sub-cabinet level if he proposed a plan to Congress, and Congress did not do anything for 60 days. There was, if there'd been and we did this, we proposed it, Congress didn't do anything. If they'd voted, it would have been unanimous in both houses. So I don't think that there was a legitimacy problem. But there were two things that were interesting with respect to the origins of the administrative state. The first is that at the beginning, it was not going to be the Environmental Protection Agency, but the Environmental Financing Agency. We realized that hundreds of millions of dollars of investment were going to be required to reduce industrial pollution, municipal wastewater runoff, all sorts of environmental problems, change agricultural practices. We thought that these should be government expenditures. We were going to have an authority which would raise money. We thought that these were legitimate sort of things to borrow money for, investments for the future. But when we thought about how you would expend that money, give the money to General Motors to put in pollution gear on their cars, there would be endless arguments about how much we were paying and so forth. It just became impossible. And the idea that we would just issue rules so that people would comply with them and the costs of control would go into the prices of their goods, it seemed more sensible, more practically workable. What we did not see was that this created incentives in the executive branch to overregulate, precisely because we didn't have a budget, and because the costs of our policies were not going to show up in people's tax bills or in scary headlines about the deficit, but in prices paid by the private sector. This was a new dynamic for people in government, and one that has had untoward consequences. Secondly,
Just explain for a
yes.
moment, how did it show up in prices? It's not a tax, I understand that,
But if General Motors has to install a catalytic converter
Then it
on
must.
your car, at first those were very expensive and they had very pronounced effects on the price of automobiles. But when you buy a pharmaceutical drug, when you pay your electric bill, when you buy these days virtually any product, you are paying a significant surcharge for compliance with procedures handed down by the government.
Okay.
Secondly, one of the things that I promoted and that President Nixon really liked and thought would be a departure and good policy was that instead of approaching environmental problems through regulation in the manner that I've just described, that we would do so through economic incentives. And in our proposals in early 1970, the year that we created the EPA, we were going about creating the EPA. One of his centerpieces was a national tax on sulfur dioxide emissions. Okay? We could not find a single member of the House of Representatives of either party to sponsor this. We didn't want taxes. We're taxing something that's bad to create an incentive. People do not like to propose new taxes. And we tried very hard, but either public financing through bonds or taxation, both of those were non-starters practically or politically. So we ended up with the regime that we have today, which I think, especially compared to a tax approach, is terribly inefficient and wasteful.
And now that your conscience is clear on that on that question, what about the larger paradox, though, that under Nixon and in his own, I suppose, in his own way,
Yes.
George W. Bush, we have seen significant increases in government, in the sort of the popular way of speaking about that.
Yes, I believe that I think that that's tremendously important, and it shows that the deep causes of the current problems that we're facing are institutional, and I'm a strong, full spectrum conservative and all of that. I do not know whether the Obama administration is a trend or a blip. I think that he has taken excesses with executive power far beyond those of George Bush, but I think that George W. Bush engaged in some excesses of his own. I regard this as essentially a non-partisan problem, and I do not think that the growth of the administrative state is because liberals now today call themselves progressives, because Woodrow Wilson progressivism theories have finally, there's a lot of Americans that really believe in it.
The light bulb went on.
So I don't
100
think
years later.
it's because these ideas finally sunk in. I think it is because of fairly neutral changes, the rise of affluence, of technology, the erosion of the old political hierarchies, such as the committee structure in Congress, the parties, the fact that anybody can mount a cause of any form, and any politician can ignore the wishes of party leadership. Who's the party leadership anyway? And go into business promoting one cause of his own or another. Last year, there was some amusement in Washington when it was revealed that the Agriculture Department was requiring magicians that keep bunnies to pull out of hats had to prepare and file with Washington contingency plans for evacuating bunnies in the face of civil disturbances, tornadoes, hurricanes, and floods. And this was the source of a great deal of ridicule. But if you go back and you look at the development of this rule, it's the kind of thing that never could have happened in the past. But there were some people that were concerned that in Katrina some animals had been lost.
Yes.
That had been at exhibitions in New Orleans. So somebody put a rider in some appropriation bill that the Agriculture's Animal Inspection Service should do something about this. So what is a bureaucracy, what are they going to do about this? So they say everybody's got to prepare a plan and file a plan. They weren't thinking that magicians
Right.
that have a single bunny, for doing at a kid's party, would be covered by the words that they were writing. But then an agriculture official was attending a birthday party for a kid, and the magician had his rabbit and everything, and she asked if he had prepared a contingency plan in the case of a national disaster. And one thing led to another. When it all came to light, the people for the ethical treatment of animals were not amused by
Yes.
the ridicule. And if this regulation were withdrawn, they understood that this could create problems. So they objected to the Agriculture Department's proposals to relax this, or maybe change the rule, or maybe have an exemption for magicians that only have 3 or fewer bunnies or something like that. And it has been in limbo now for a year. The department cannot make a decision. And I'm an amateur magician myself, so I'm sympathetic to this aspect of the economy, but it is a microcosm of how discretionary government that can always be hijacked by one group or another that has very limited foresight of what its rules are doing can be put into paralysis and uncertainty. We magicians do not know whether we're going to have to file contingency plans regarding our bunnies, and who knows when this will be decided. Now, I'm making light of this. I could talk about Dodd-Frank or Obamacare or something like that, but there are an infinity of incidents such as this that our modern government is capable of implementing. It is Tocqueville's nightmare.
We either need less government or a better sense of humor. And I'm going to
Both
put you
could go
down.
together.
You're against animal safety, DeMuth?
Right,
Is this correct?
right.
All right. Thank you.